If you wanted to destroy Red Bull's dominance, you wouldn't touch the car. You would take the one man who made everything work. And that's exactly what McLaren just did. Gianpiero Lambiase, the voice behind 4 world championships, the man making every critical decision at 300 km/h, is leaving Red Bull and heading straight into McLaren's future. Nearly a decade. Over 60 wins. Every race built on one connection, between driver and engineer. And now, that connection is being transferred to a rival. But here's what makes this even bigger. McLaren didn't just sign him. They're building around him. A leadership role. A long-term project. A system designed to replicate, and then replace, everything Red Bull created. This isn't a move. It's a takeover in slow motion. Because in Formula 1, when you steal how a team wins, you don't chase them. You become them. This wasn't a random move. It wasn't timing. It wasn't opportunity. This was planned. Because McLaren didn't just take Lambiase, they targeted him. Very carefully. Very deliberately. And once you see the pattern, you realize this started long before anyone noticed. Because this is not the first piece they've taken from Red Bull. They already secured key figures in design. They already brought in strategic minds. They already rebuilt their technical structure. Step by step. Layer by layer. And now, they take the most important piece of all. The one that connects everything on race day. The one that turns data into decisions, and decisions into wins. Lambiase. But here's what makes this different. Because this is not about improving McLaren. This is about replicating Red Bull. Taking the exact system that dominated Formula 1. And rebuilding it somewhere else. With better timing. With better stability. With momentum already on their side. And that changes everything. Because now, McLaren is not chasing Red Bull. They are reconstructing them. But without the internal fractures. Without the instability. Without the pressure of trying to maintain dominance. And that gives them an advantage. Because building something new is always easier than trying to hold something together that's starting to break. But here's where it becomes even more strategic. Because Lambiase is not joining as just another engineer. He's stepping into leadership. Which means he won't just apply knowledge. He will shape the entire system. From the inside. From the top. And that's how you create long-term dominance. Not with one good car. Not with one good season. With a structure that can win consistently. Year after year. And this is exactly what McLaren is preparing. But there's another layer here. One that makes this move even more powerful. Because Lambiase doesn't just bring knowledge of Red Bull. He brings understanding of one driver. Max Verstappen. How he thinks. How he reacts under pressure. How to extract the absolute maximum from him every single lap. That kind of understanding cannot be taught. It takes years. And now, that knowledge is no longer exclusive to Red Bull. It's moving. And once it arrives at McLaren, everything changes. Because suddenly, the hardest part of building a winning team is already solved. And that raises a question that cannot be ignored anymore. Because if you are preparing the perfect structure, if you are rebuilding the exact system that made a driver dominant, if you are bringing in the one person who understands him completely, then who is all of this for? Because in Formula 1, moves like this are never isolated. They are connected. They lead somewhere. And right now, this one is pointing in a very specific direction. Toward something much bigger than just an engineer changing teams. And once you follow that direction, everything starts to feel less like coincidence, and more like strategy. Because this is how Formula 1 really works. The biggest moves are never announced. They are built. Quietly. Patiently. Until one day, they're impossible to stop. And that's exactly what McLaren is doing right now. Because they are not reacting to Red Bull. They are positioning themselves for what comes after Red Bull. And that's a completely different mindset. Because while one team is trying to defend its dominance, the other is preparing to take it. But here's where it becomes even more revealing. Because you don't build a structure like this just to compete. You build it to win immediately. No adaptation. No transition period. No learning phase. Which means one thing. When the final piece arrives, everything is already ready. And that changes the entire equation. Because in Formula 1, the biggest risk for any driver is moving to a new team, new engineers, new communication, new system. Everything takes time. But McLaren is removing that risk, piece by piece, by building something that already feels familiar, already feels understood, already feels like it was made for someone specific. And that's what makes this situation so powerful. Because it's not just attractive, it's comfortable. And comfort, at this level, is confidence. The kind of confidence that allows a driver to perform instantly. Without hesitation. Without doubt. And that's exactly the environment Verstappen has always needed. But here's where the tension reaches its highest point. Because while McLaren is building this future, Red Bull is trying to protect the present, holding on to what remains, adjusting roles, trying to maintain a system that is no longer complete. And that difference is what decides everything. Because one team is evolving forward, while the other is trying not to fall apart. And in Formula One, that gap doesn't stay small. It grows fast. But here's the most important part of all. Because this entire story doesn't depend on McLaren. It doesn't depend on Red Bull. It depends on one decision, one moment, one realization. Because at some point, Verstappen will look at both sides, at what he has, and what is being built. And when he does, he won't need to guess. He won't need to wait. He will know. And once he knows, everything moves. Because drivers like him don't hesitate. They act. Quietly. Decisively. And by the time the rest of the world understands what happened, the future has already changed. Because this was never just about Lambiase leaving. It was about what his move made possible. A shift. A transfer of power. A new center in Formula One. That might already be forming. And the only thing left is the moment when it becomes real. And when that moment finally arrives, it won't feel dramatic. It won't feel sudden. It will feel obvious. Like everything was always leading here. Because by then, all the pieces will already be in place. McLaren will have the structure, the leadership, the system that once made Red Bull unbeatable. And most importantly, they will have the one thing that takes years to build. Understanding. Real understanding of how to win at the highest level. And Red Bull will be in a completely different position. Not collapsing. Not finished. But no longer untouchable. No longer certain. No longer the only place where success is guaranteed. And that changes how everything is seen. Inside the team. Inside the paddock. Inside Verstappen's mind. Because at that point, the question is no longer hypothetical. It becomes real. Stay, and rebuild something that is no longer what it used to be. Or leave, and step into something already prepared. And that's the moment that defines entire eras in Formula One. Not when teams rise, but when drivers choose. Because drivers like Verstappen don't just follow performance. They follow clarity. Stability, direction. And right now, only one team is moving in a straight line, while the other is adjusting, reacting, trying to recover what it has already lost. And that contrast is impossible to ignore. But here's the final detail that changes everything. Because once a driver starts seeing that contrast clearly, the decision is no longer difficult. It becomes inevitable, not emotional, not rushed, just logical. And when that kind of decision is made, it doesn't come with warnings. It doesn't come with signs. It arrives fully formed. Already decided. Already irreversible. And when it finally happens, people will look back at this exact moment. At this exact move. And realize something they didn't fully understand at the time. This wasn't just about McLaren getting stronger. This was about Red Bull losing control of its own future. Because in Formula One, you don't lose dominance when someone beats you. You lose it when someone rebuilds what made you dominant. Somewhere else. And that's exactly what is happening now. Right in front of everyone. Quietly. Precisely. Inevitably. And if you take one step further, beyond the move, beyond the strategy, beyond the timing, you start to see the real outcome. Because this is not just about who gains more power. It's about who controls the next era of Formula One. And right now, that control is shifting. Not loudly. Not instantly. But undeniably. Because what McLaren is building is not just competitive. It's sustainable. A structure designed to last. A system designed to evolve. A foundation that doesn't depend on one moment or one season. And that's exactly what Red Bull used to have. But not anymore. Because once the core people leave, once the knowledge spreads, once the system is no longer exclusive, you lose your biggest advantage. And that's what this entire situation exposes. Red Bull is no longer the only team that knows how to win like Red Bull. Now, that knowledge exists somewhere else. Growing. Improving. Adapting. And that's what makes this so dangerous. Because it means the future is no longer controlled by the past. It's being rewritten. But here's the final shift. The one that defines everything. Because once McLaren completes this transformation, once Lambiase steps fully into leadership, once the system is fully operational, they won't just be competing for wins. They'll be setting the standard. The same way Red Bull once did. And when a new standard is created, the entire grid has to react to it, including Red Bull. And that's the moment where everything flips. Because suddenly, Red Bull is no longer the reference. They become the ones chasing, trying to understand, trying to rebuild, trying to catch up to something that looks very familiar, but is no longer theirs. And that's the true impact of this move. Not what happens today. Not what happens next race. What happens when the balance of power fully shifts. Because when it does, it won't be gradual anymore. It will be clear, visible, undeniable. A new dominant force, built from the pieces of the old one. And at that point, there is only one thing left to decide. Who leads that new era? Because the structure will be ready. The system will be proven. The opportunity will be there. And when everything is aligned like that, the final move is never far away.